first ASMR reading video. Today's book, and for the next few videos, is going to be John Saul's Hellfire. For this video, I will be reading through the prologue and chapter 1. So, sit back and let's see how this goes. Prologue. The boy turned off the path that wound down from the big house on the hill, his house, and wandered along the riverbank. 100 yards ahead, he could see the wooden trestle that carried the railroad tracks over the rushing stream. He had always imagined that the stream was a boundary, visible line that separated him from everyone else in the little town. The river wasn't there, he sometimes thought, then he would be part of the town. But of course, it wasn't just a river. There was far more to it than that. He came to the trestle and paused. Partly, he was listening for the sound of a train, for he knew that if he could hear the low rumblings of an engine, it wasn't safe to cross the river. You had to wait until the train had come and gone, or until the sound had faded away into silence. Sometimes, though, he was tempted to try the crossing, even though he could hear a train coming, just to see if he could make it in time. But of course, he never tried it. It was too big a risk. Not that he didn't like risks. He did. There was nothing he liked more than going off by himself, exploring the woods that covered the hillside, poking along the riverbank, skipping from stone to stone, though sooner or later he would miss his footing and slide into the rushing waters. But the rushing waters wouldn't kill him. A train catching him defenseless in the middle of a trestle wood. For a moment, he visualized himself, crushed under the weight of the streamliner that roared past the town twice a day, his mutilated body dropping into the river below. He put the thought out of his mind, and instead, as he often did, pictured himself already dead. He saw himself in a coffin now, with flowers all around him. His parents, their eyes wet with tears, sat in the front pew of the little Episcopalian church in the middle of town. So I didn't butcher that. Behind them, he could see all the other people of the town staring at his coffin, wishing they'd been nicer to him, wishing they'd been his friends. Not that he cared, he assured himself. It was more fun to be by yourself anyway. Besides, he had friends most of the time anyway. And when he came home from school in the summer, it was nice to be able to play by himself without anyone else wanting to do something he might not want to do. Abandoning the fantasy, he listened carefully. When he heard no sound of an approaching train, he started across the trestle, carefully stepping from tie to tie, then continued along the tracks as they swept around the village in a long and gentle curve. Suddenly, he felt eyes watching him, and glanced off to the left. A quarter of a block down the road, 2 boys stood side by side, staring at him. He smiled, but as he was about to wave to them, they turned away. He could hear them snickering as they whispered to each other. His face burning with sudden anger, he hurried along the railroad tracks until he was certain he could no longer be seen from the road. Between himself and the other boys, separating him from the village, stood the forbidding brick walls of a building that had fascinated him for as long as he could remember. The boy hesitated, remembering the stories he'd heard from his father, remembering the legends about what had happened in that building so many years ago. Terrible things that only could be spoken of in whispers. No one knew the legends were really true. As he stared at the building, he began to feel as if the other boys, the village boys, were still watching him, challenging him, laughing at him, because they knew he didn't have the courage to go inside. Always before, when he'd stood here contemplating the old building, he'd eventually lost his nerve and turned away. But today would be different. Ignoring the knot of fear that now burned hot in his belly, he left the railroad tracks and scrambled down the slope of the roadbed. He started along a weed-choked path that paralleled the side of the building. Halfway along the wall, he came to a small door, covered over with weathered boards that had long since shrunken with age. Through the gaps between the boards, he could make out the door itself, held closed only by a padlock on a rusted hasp. Gingerly, he tested one of the boards. The corroded nails groaned for a second, then gave way. A moment later, two more boards lay on the ground at the boy's feet. The boy reached out and grasped the padlock. He paused, knowing that if he gave way, he would then be committed to go inside. He took a deep breath, tightened his grip, and twisted. The rusted hasp held for a moment, then broke loose. The lock, free from the door it had guarded so long, lay in the boy's hand. He stared at it for several long seconds, almost wishing he had left it in place. Then, struggling against a strange fear he could feel growing within him, the boy pushed the door open and squirmed through the gap left by the 3 planks he had torn away. For a moment, the deep shadows blinded him, but then his eyes adjusted to the dim light of the interior and he looked around. Inside, the building seemed even larger than it looked from the outside and emptier. Except, the boy realized, it didn't feel empty at all. Somewhere he was certain there was someone or something lurking within these walls, waiting for him. Almost against his will, his eyes began exploring the old building. Emptiness stretched away in all directions, and far above him, just visible in the shadowed light that barely penetrated the immense space, the tangled iron struts supporting the roof seemed to reach down to him as if trying to grasp him in their skeletal arms. In the silence, the boy could hear the pounding of his own heart. Suddenly, a cacophony of sound filled the enormous building, and the boy felt a scream rising in his throat. He choked it back at the last second, then forced himself to look up. A flock of pigeons, frightened by the boy's intrusion, had burst from their nests and now wheeled beneath the roof. As the boy watched, they began settling once more into their nests. I think instead of reading chapter 1, I think we'll just read the prologue for this video. Don't worry, I'll get to chapter 1 eventually. Just gotta be on the lookout for that. Seconds later, silence once more cast an eerie spell over the vast emptiness. The boy gazed into the gloom and saw, far away, at the back of the building, the top of a flight of stairs. Beneath him, then, was not simply a solid floor. Beneath this floor, there was a basement. The stairs seemed to beckon to him, to demand that he come and explore that which lay beneath. The boy's heart began pounding once more. A cold sweat broke out on his back. Cold sweat, my bad. Suddenly, he could stand the sound no longer. No, I won't. His voice, far louder than he had intended, echoed back to him, and once again the pigeons milled madly among the rafters, fluttering in confusion. Gasping, the boy shrank back against the reassuring solidity of the brick wall. When the silence came once more, the compelling fascination of the downward leading stairs gripped him once again. He forced his fear down. Slowly he began moving toward the back of the building. He had moved only a few yards when suddenly the boy felt his skin crawl. Something, he was certain, was watching him. He tried to ignore it, keeping his eyes on the far wall, but a strange sensation wouldn't go away. The hair on the back of his neck was standing up now, and he could feel goosebumps covering his arms. He could stand it no longer, and whirled around to face whatever was behind him. Nothing. His eyes stretched to semi-darkness, looking for something, anything. The vast expanse seemed empty. But then, once again, the hair on the back of his neck stood up, and his spine began to tingle. He whirled once more. Once more, there was nothing. Yet something seemed to fill the emptiness, seemed to surround him, taunt him. He should never have come inside. He knew that now. Knew it was a certainty that made his blood run cold. But now it was too late. Now there was no turning back. Far away and seeming to recede into the distance, he could barely make out the small rectangle of brightness that marked a door he had come through only a few minutes before. The door was too far away. It seemed as if he had been in the mysterious gloom forever, and already, dimly, he began to understand that he was never going to leave. There was something here, something that wanted him. Charged with the inexorable force of his own imagination, he moved once more toward the vortex that was the stairwell. He paused at the top of the stairs, peering fearfully into the blackness below. He wanted to turn now and run away, run back toward that distant speck of light in the daylight beyond. But it was too late. The gloom of the building held him in its rapture, and though there was nothing but darkness below, he knew he had no choice but to continue down the stairs. He started down the steps, straining to see into the blackness that seemed to go on forever. There was a mustiness in the air below, and something else, some faint odor he couldn't quite identify, but that seemed oddly familiar. came to the bottom of the stairs, and stopped, terrified. Again, he wanted to turn around, turn away from the evil he felt in the darkness, but he knew he couldn't. Then he heard a sound, barely distinguishable. He listened, straining his ears. Was it real, or had he only imagined it? He heard it again. Some kind of animal, it had to be. A rat, perhaps, or maybe only a mouse. Or was it something else, something unreal? A voice whispering to him so quietly he couldn't make out the words, calling to him, luring him on into the darkness and the unknown. The strange odor grew stronger, its acidity burning in its nostrils. He stepped up the last stair and began groping his way through the darkness. He thought he could feel unseen hands guiding him, feel a strange force drawing him on. And then, though he could see nothing, he sensed a presence. It was close to him. Too close. Who? He began, but his question was cut off as something struck him from behind. Staggering, he pitched forward, his balance gone, and tried to break his fall by throwing arms in front of him, but it was too late. Even as he fell, he knew it. He opened his mouth to scream, but his throat felt choked as those strangling hands held him in a deadly grip. No sound emerged from his throat. In an instant that seemed to go on forever, he felt a coldness slide through his clothing, piercing his skin, an icy pain that slipped between his ribs deep into his chest. The object, the thing, the unidentifiable evil, plunged into his heart, and he felt himself begin to die. And as he died, he slowly recognized the familiar odor that had filled his nostrils. Smoke. For some reason, in that long, abandoned basement, he smelled smoke. Then, as the last vestiges of life drained from his body, he saw flames flickering out from beneath the stairway, and the faint remnants of his consciousness, he heard laughter. Laughter mixed with screams of terror. The laughter and the screams closed in on him, growing louder and louder, mingling with the ice-cold pain until there was nothing but blackness. And for the boy, the terror was over. End the prologue. I'm going to need to find some kind of bookmark because I do not want to lose my spot for this. What can I use? Give me what? Ooh, this'll work. This'll work. Perfect. Okay. Got my bookmark. Well, this was John Saul's Hellfire Prologue. I will be reading more of this book for you guys in more future videos. I hope that this was enjoyable for you, and if you do want to see more, make sure to like and subscribe, turn on notifications so you don't miss a future upload. And I got plenty of other projects coming up, more collaboration videos, a live stream that I have planned for an achievement stream, and potentially some horror is going to be coming to my channel very soon. So be on the lookout for that. So, have a good day. Oh, and one last thing.